So Nick, Gabe, and I are biking straight across the dried-up playa of the Alvord Desert, aiming for this gap in the rim on the far side, where we're hoping to link up with an historic wagon route that dates from the 1800s that I found on some old map. We are deep in the heart of Southeast Oregon, one of my favorite places anywhere. And part of the reason that I love it so much, and I keep going back, is this unique combination of geology and history. But also because it's really remote. There's hardly anybody there. There's a trend I've noticed in my trips over the years that generally the fewer people I see on a trip, the better it is. So we make it the 7 miles across the Alvord Desert, and we push our bikes up and through the big sand gap on this old wagon route, and we make it to our end location for the evening, the Willow Hot Springs. And things are going really well. We didn't know what to expect going into this trip, and so far everything's going better than we had hoped. Until we wake up in the morning. I've done a lot of trips with Gabe over the years, and on every single trip I've ever done, he's destroyed something on his bike. This time it was his front tire. The bead all the way around the front tire was separating from the sidewall. This isn't something that you can just fix. The only repair is to replace the tire. We don't have a spare tire, and we're out in the middle of nowhere. So our trip it's over, it's done, we're going home. The only thing we have to deal with now is the logistics of getting from where we are up and over Steens Mountain to the car 100 miles away. Fortunately, Gabe's tire is temporarily holding, so we limp our way towards the only little speck of civilization between where we are and where we need to be, a tiny little town called Fields, Oregon. Google says the population is 120, which seems a little bit generous. But we make it to Fields. And when we get there, we decide that our best bet at this point is to try and hitch a ride the rest of the way to the car. So we park ourselves down in front of the general store, literally stick out our thumbs, and wait for somebody to drive by. While we're waiting, we end up befriending the mayor of this little tiny town. Thaddeus. Thaddeus he's sharp, he's witty, and he's 8 years old. Now, it's pretty obvious to us that Thaddeus isn't the real mayor of Fields, but that's what he tells us. It's also pretty obvious that he's a bit of a con man. So he ropes me into playing marbles with him, which I didn't know kids still played marbles, but Thaddeus does. Every time that I would start to get up in a game, he'd change the rules and he would win. And this happened over and over again. By the time I got tired of playing with him, I wasn't sure what game we were playing or what any of the rules were. But there turned out to be one big benefit of playing marbles with this particular 8-year-old. He's got a buddy, Ray. Critically for us, Ray is old enough to drive, he owns a truck, and we're able to convince him to at least drive us to the top of the pass, so it's generally downhill the rest of the way to the car. So Ray goes to grab his truck. And when he said truck, I just assumed he's got one of those big old pickup trucks like everybody out there drives. But when he comes around the front of the general store, his truck is actually a Ford Bronco, an old SUV. And the problem is that there doesn't seem to be any way of attaching our 3 big, loaded down bikes to the outside of his Bronco. But Ray's a clever guy, and Ray doesn't skip a beat. Before I can even figure out what his plan is, he's got 2 of the bikes stacked on top of each other on the roof of his Bronco. And he takes one solitary strap, throws it over the bikes, and puts it through the front windows so that the driver and the passenger can hold the bikes down. So then he takes the third bike, and he literally just lays it down on the hood of the Bronco. Now, the bike on the hood, that's my bike, and that's the only bike I really care about. And I'm concerned because it's not attached to anything. But I also don't want to offend Ray. So as casually as I possibly can, I ask him if maybe we should strap it down to something. So Ray walks over. He grabs the front tire. He gives it a little wiggle. Nah, it'll be fine. So we pile in his Bronco and very slowly and very carefully start winding our way up the mountain towards the pass. The first thing we notice is that Ray is particularly good at multitasking. So, like most of us, he's only got two hands. But he is simultaneously driving, smoking a cigarette, drinking what may or may not have been vodka out of a glass in his cup holder, while occasionally holding onto that strap coming in the window that's supposed to be keeping the bikes from falling off of the roof. Now, I can't speak for Ray, but there is this general sense of distrust between people who live in rural places like Southeast Oregon and people who come from big cities like Portland. And I think that part of the reason is that people from the big city tend to treat people like Ray like they're idiots and like they're hicks. I would like to think it was because we were very genuinely interested in Southeast Oregon, in the people, in the places, and in particular, we were interested in Ray and his story, that he ends up letting his guard down a little bit and talking about himself. And he tells us about serving in the military and being stationed in Iraq and how he ends up in Southeast Oregon and what it's like to live in a tiny little town like Fields. And while he's opening up to us, he reaches up onto the dashboard and he grabs a box of 9mm shells and 2 empty clips to a Glock. And he hands them to me in the back seat and asks me to fill the clips up for him. Now, I have no idea why he wants me to do this, but I do know that it's normal to have a gun in your car in this part of the country, and Ray is this super nice, super generous guy who's doing us a favor. So I'm not going to ask him why he wants me to do it. I just do it. So we make it to the top of the pass. We get out, we unload the bikes, and Ray invites us to hang out and shoot guns with him. And we're really, really excited. There is no chance that we're going to turn him down. And the 4 of us devolve into this pack of wild boys. And we're shooting at cans, and we're making dumb jokes, and we're drinking beers, and just bullshitting about life. And when Ray turns his Bronco around and heads back down towards Fields, and we point our bikes in the other direction down the hill towards our car, I'm just buzzing. And it's not just because of the beers. I'm buzzing from this very honest and genuine, and I think rare interaction with somebody who's very different from me. If this trip had gone the way that I originally hoped that it would go, we wouldn't have seen anybody. And we never would have had an opportunity to shoot marbles with Thaddeus and shoot guns with Ray. and we would have missed out on what ended up being the most memorable part of the whole trip. Thank you.